Conditions May Apply by CinnamonPinecones. Read by Distracted by Books. Chapter 39. 911, What's Your Emergency? It wasn't until the following Thursday that Shota was able to successfully negotiate a raid on the warehouse. The suits were far more hesitant to waste resources uptown than he thought they'd be, and Ivy bugging him about it daily wasn't helping his mounting annoyance with the situation. When Ivy shot their way up and over the ledge of the roof they always met at, he held a hand up to stop them before they even started asking. Yes, I've gotten approval for the raid. I have all the information we gathered here. If you could go over it before we set a time and date, that would be helpful, he said as he pulled out the folded up sheets of paper from one of his pockets. They immediately snatched it out of his hand and started reading so quickly that Shota had a hard time believing they even gleaned any information from it at all. But he trusted that the kid cared enough to take this seriously. Maybe they just read that fast. It wouldn't be the first weird ability they'd revealed, and it likely wouldn't be the last. His suspicions were confirmed when he watched them read through it a second and third time at the same speed before handing it back to him with a nod. Yes, that's all correct, they stated in a way that made it sound like they had more to say. He gave them a second, and they didn't meet his eyes. He could already feel the oncoming headache. Okay, let me finish before you chew me out. I've been keeping an eye out for their comings and goings, and I've got 3 more names and 2 more faces that aren't from around here. I don't know what the traffic around here looks like from 6 to 4 on weekdays, but there's consistently been a shift swap around 4:30 every day. I think that's the best time to strike. We'll get the most people that way, they explained as they fidgeted with their gloves. One rule. He gave them one rule. He rubbed his hands over his face and massaged his temples before letting out an exasperated groan. Ivy already looked uncomfortable. Good. Write all of that down on the back of the last sheet, he said in a clipped tone as he pulled out a pen and handed it to them along with the file. They took it sheepishly and walked over to the ledge and used it as a writing surface. When they returned, he glanced at it to make sure it was legible. The kanji was neat and orderly despite the lack of lines on the paper, so he folded it back up and stuck it in his pocket. When he looked up, Ivy looked like a man preparing for a walk to the gallows. I'm using my capture weapon in our spars today, he stated with no inflection. There wasn't much skin showing on Ivy's face, but he could tell that the color drained from it by the way their eyes widened. They turned on their heel with a squeak, but Shota just let out a loop of his scarf and tripped them. Better get used to the taste of gravel, kid, he called out as Ivy lay on the ground, groaning. Ivy had a face full of rooftop for the umpteenth time in the last half hour, and they were sweating buckets in the early summer heat when Eraser piped up, sounding no worse for wear. Why don't you know the traffic from 6 to 4? You got a day job? He inquired casually. Of course, he'd be making small talk while beating their ass relentlessly. He was probably playing mind games, the sick, sadistic bastard. This doesn't exactly pay the bills, Eraser, they shot back. It wasn't a lie, but unfortunately going to school didn't pay the bills either. You said we would get the most people if we struck at their shift swap. You know you can't come with, right? He said far more gently as he gave them a moment to get back to their feet. Oh, yeah, that made sense. Obviously they couldn't go with, not with the police there. Crap. They were still technically a, quote, criminal, and just because Suka and Eraser were turning a blind eye doesn't mean that an entire raid squad would. Dang. They were leading a bunch of cops into their district, and they wouldn't even be around to make sure everyone not involved with the lab was safe. They should be far enough away in the warehouse district, but it still didn't sit right with them. They couldn't even warn people to stay away from there. Dang it. Eraser was giving them a moment to process. When they looked up, he was studying them intently. He was going to be there. They had to trust him. You'll keep them in the warehouse district, right? Keep them away from these streets, they asked, almost pleading. There's no reason for them to come over this way unless they have to chase someone down, and even then, their focus won't be on people up here. I can't promise anything, but I'll do my best to make sure no one but the people involved with that lab get taken in, he claimed, and as far as Ivy could see, he meant it. Okay, they can trust Eraser with this. As soon as they made up their mind, their legs were somehow above their head and they were sprawled out on the gravel again. What the hell was that for, you butthead? They cried. For being a reckless idiot, he shot back. The raid was set for Friday at 4:30, just as they had suggested to Eraser. As soon as he got back from school, he shot up to the roof and started pacing circles around DJ. He wouldn't be able to see what was going on from here, not by a long shot, but he would be able to hear sirens leaving. And if Eraser didn't contact him the second he heard that, he might actually die. Everything about the situation felt wrong. Like over half the people in Uptown, he could be arrested for any number of things, and he was leading the enemy right into his territory. It was different when Suka came to pick up perps or he sent an officer or two to round them up. Eraser said there were going to be upwards of 20 armed officers. This lab had been transporting to regions outside of Uptown, so this was going to be a major drug bust, and he couldn't be there to help or protect people who weren't involved. After maybe his 30th circle around DJ, he felt something pull at his leg. She was lazily staring up at him with her claws looped through his pant leg. DJ, let go. If I don't keep moving, I think I might explode. She just blinked at him slowly. You are so precious. She let out a small meow at the compliment and closed her eyes again, keeping her claws embedded in his pant leg. Relenting, Izuku plopped down next to her. I really hope everyone there today is actually involved in the lab. I don't want them bringing bystanders in. I saw Kanda bring his girlfriend by once, but she stayed in the car, he recalled as he fiddled with his shoelace. They have the grounds to take in everyone there, but just because someone knows about doesn't make it their fault. If someone ratted them out, the gang could put a hit on them. They shouldn't be arrested just because they didn't risk their lives to take them down, he explained. DJ opened her eyes for a moment and started bapping at his shoelaces as he twisted them around his fingers. See, you get it. He let her continue to half-heartedly bat around his laces as he buried his hands in his hair. This is going to be the longest hour and a half of my life, he groaned into his shirt sleeves. He rested his elbows on his knees as he sat crisscrossed and pressed the heels of his palms into his eyes. His hair was down and the breeze had it tickling his face, but he paid it no mind. Seconds ticked by into minutes, and DJ settled herself against his left leg. So he started carding his left hand through her fur as she purred. It was nice to have her here. She had a way of making everything seem manageable. Besides messing with her hunting grounds or her beauty rest, nothing short of the end of the world would upset her. Well, maybe falling through the roof into a pit of muddy water would upset her too, but she was always so calm. Even when she was bothered, she was lazily bothered, and it made everything seem less urgent than it usually did. Izuku's mind had a way of making everything seem incredibly urgent, and DJ's calm purring helped him find a middle ground. Whatever happens, happens. We need to get those drugs off the streets, he said, and took some deep breaths in time with DJ's purring. He managed to lull himself into an almost meditative state following DJ's lead. Maybe this is why she's always so calm, but the sound of sirens snapped him out of it immediately. DJ's ears twitched, and Izuku fumbled through his pocket for his phone. Nothing from Eraser yet. Come on, he chanted at the phone as if that could make the update come any faster. A few minutes passed before his phone lit up with a message. Eraserhead. Raid went well. No major injuries and no deaths. 11 people are in custody. I'm heading back to the precinct, and I'll give you a full brief when I see you later. He let out some nonsense mess of consonants and fell back to lay on the roof. DJ made her displeasure for the outburst known with a meow and nuzzled back into the warmth of his side. For the first time since they started meeting here, Ivy showed up before Eraserhead. He was probably still at the station, so they pulled out their knives and started slinging them at the poor butchered target still pinned to the roof access stairwell wall. Over the months, their aim had improved significantly, and they were able to get about 1 in every 5 throws to stick into the brick. They could probably get a better ratio with new knives, because all the practice they'd been doing had dulled their point significantly. Maybe they could grind them back to shape. That would mess with their balance, though. They'd have to ask Eraser. They'd been hurling knives for nearly a full hour by the time Eraser showed up. Sorry I'm late. Had to tie up some things at the station, he said after touching down on the roof. They threw the last knife in their hand, and it sunk into the wall pretty close to the center of what used to be the target, before walking over to him and demanding he elaborate on his message. You were right about the shift changing. We got all the names you listed, and then some. I believe everyone there had a role to play, either in production or distribution, so no bystanders got caught up. I have a list of names here if you want to look through it. I can get their mug shots once everything's fully processed if you don't recognize them by name, he said, handing him a small slip of paper with names scrawled over it. Did he copy down classified information for them by hand? Aw, how thoughtful. When they looked back up, Eraser was looking back at them with a serious expression. Not that he ever looked anything but serious, but Ivy was becoming quite skilled at reading the microscopic movements of his brow, so they could tell he had more to say. They lifted an eyebrow in response. Everything went off without a hitch, but we just made ourselves a lot of enemies, kid. I know you know this place and these people, but don't let your guard down, okay? He warned as he looked them in the eye. Yeah, this was going to make the gang mad, like really mad, and they were going to know who to blame immediately. Law enforcement never got involved around here unless one of them called them in. The target on their backs just got a lot bigger. End of chapter.